Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin, check. You already know. Let's go. Golden Blued is a college football YouTube channel for entertainment. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into our next college football video. Well, the playoffs are almost here, so it's time to do a preview prediction video for both playoff games, but I will do them separately. So for this video, I'm doing my preview prediction on the Fiesta Bowl between number 3 TCU, who finished 12-1, runner-up in the Big 12 championship, against number 2 Michigan, who finished 13-0, Big 10 champs. I think this is a much better Michigan team than what they were last year. I think they are much more prepared to have a deeper run. And I think this first round matchup favors Michigan. And they stand a much better chance of getting to the national championship than what they did last year. That Georgia team from last year was just historically great, especially on the defense. But let's talk about this matchup first. Well, for starters, TCU had a lot of comebacks and several close calls, and they also had a loss in the Big 12 championship. Let's talk about their comebacks. First comeback was against then number 8 Oklahoma State. Of course, now we know that Oklahoma State isn't a very good team. They finished unranked, and I believe they finished 7-5 in the regular season. TCU was down 24-7 in the second quarter, and then 30-16 in the third quarter. TCU never led the game until they won the game in overtime, 43-40. You talk about a close call. That was a close call, and it was a home game. Next comeback was against then number 17 Kansas State. Kansas State actually turned out to be a pretty good team. They were down 28-10 in the second quarter, but ended up winning 38-28. Problem was, Kansas State was down to their third string quarterback. Whenever they had their first string and their second string, Kansas State was actually dominating TCU fairly easily. And once again, this also was a home game. Another home game where they slightly struggled was against Texas Tech. They were down 17-13 in the third. They came back and won that game 34-24. Then we remember that road trip to Baylor. They were down 28-20 in the fourth quarter, and they won on a runoff, not a walk-off, but a runoff field goal, 29-28. That was most certainly a close call for TCU. And then we also remember the Big 12 championship, where they actually lost to then number 10 Kansas State. They were down 28-17 in the fourth quarter, sent it to overtime, but lost in overtime 31-28. I think they have a really good quarterback. He was invited to the Heisman Trophy ceremony, but he didn't win the Heisman Trophy. I'm talking about quarterback Max Duggan. This year, he was 239 for 368. That's a completion percentage of 64.9%. Threw for 3,321 yards, 30 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions. Dual threat quarterback, he can hurt you with his legs. 112 carries for 404 yards. That's 3.6 yards a carry and 6 touchdowns. They also have a really good running back. Kendra Miller, he had 216 carries for 1,342 yards. That is 6.2 yards a carry and 17 touchdowns. They also have an NFL-type wide receiver. I'm talking about Quentin Johnson. I expect him to be a good wide receiver in the NFL. He had 53 carries for 903 yards and 5 touchdowns. TCU averaged 40.3 points per game and allowed 25 points per game. So their weakness was on the defense. Now for Michigan, their offense is very comparable to TCU. They averaged 40.1 points per game, but their defensive stats are much, much better than TCU's. They only allowed 13.4 points per game. They did have a couple of close calls, though. They had a tough win versus Maryland at home, 34-27, and then a very close call at home versus Illinois. They were down 17-10 in the third quarter. They kicked 3 unanswered field goals, including the last one with 9 seconds left, and they barely beat Illinois 19-17. Illinois was a decent team, but that game should have not been that close. They have a pretty good quarterback. Quarterback J.J. McCarthy on the year, 188 for 288. That is a completion percentage of 65.3%. Threw for 2,376 yards, 20 touchdowns, and just 3 interceptions. They also have a really good running back, Blake Corum. 247 carries for 1,463 yards. That's 5.9 yards a carry and 18 touchdowns. And they also have a pretty good wide receiver in Ronnie Bell. 56 receptions for 754 yards and 3 touchdowns. But Michigan definitely holds the advantage on the defensive side of the ball. They allowed just 191.8 passing yards a game and allowed just 85.2 rushing yards a game. And let's not forget whenever they flexed their offensive muscles, when they went on the road and absolutely blasted Ohio State. Ohio State did lead them at halftime 20-17, but in the second half, Michigan outscored Ohio State 28-3 to absolutely humiliate Ohio State in the horseshoe 45-23. That was an impressive win by Michigan. As far as this game goes, I do think Michigan holds a significant advantage on the defensive side of the ball, and TCU might hold a slight advantage on the offensive side of the ball. But all things considered, I think the offenses are very equal. They do have different strengths, and they score in different ways. But as far as actually putting points on the board, they're very, very similar. It's the defense where this game will be won, and I think Michigan does have the significant defensive advantage. I will say this, if Michigan does get up by a couple of touchdowns, even if it's deep into the third quarter, that's no time to relax. TCU is very, very used to coming back from deficits, and yes, Michigan is better than Oklahoma State, better than Texas Tech, better than Baylor, and yes, even better than Kansas State, so the comeback would be more difficult. But TCU has proven that they can do it time and time again. Now, they weren't able to quite do it against Kansas State. They did send it into overtime. TCU actually made a very questionable call, both on 3rd and goal and 4th and goal. It was from like the 1 or 1.5 yard line. In my personal opinion, when you're in that situation, you run the ball both times. Quarterback sneak it. What has happened to the quarterback sneak on 3rd and short or 4th and short? What is wrong with that? We have gotten away with that, and these offenses are trying to get cute, running a lot of motion and putting quarterbacks in the shotgun position. They have to make up 3 more yards when you put them in the shotgun position. Just line them up center, 3rd and goal, very, very short, and quarterback sneak it. You have 2 tries. TCU had 2 tries to punch it in right there, but they decided to get cute, and of course, it didn't work. I think if they would have lined up under center with Max Duggan, I know he was exhausted, but he's great with his legs. 2 tries, Max Duggan will get it in there with 2 quarterback sneaks back to back. But no, they got cute. Kansas State has a really disciplined defense. They didn't fall for it. And they held the goal line stand because TCU did go for it on 4th and goal. And then Kansas State just had to kick a field goal to win it into overtime. But other than that, TCU has come back time and time again. They actually did come back on Kansas State to send it overtime, but they didn't win the game. So do not get relaxed. Do not kick your feet back and take your feet off the gas if you get up, even by a couple of scores, even if it's deep into the 3rd quarter. However, I do think Michigan is the better team. I think they have fewer weaknesses, and actually, I think they could win this by a significant margin. This might be kind of like the matchup that we saw last year when Michigan played Georgia, except this time the roles are reversed. I think Michigan wins this comfortably 38-21. I think they'll be able to put up a lot of points on that TCU defense, and TCU's offense is going to have a lot of problems with this elite Michigan defense. I'm hoping TCU surprises me, makes this a close game, and perhaps upsets Michigan. But I have confidence that Michigan will win this football game comfortably and will be headed to the national championship. And this year, I think Michigan is much more prepared to win the national championship. They're not just happy to be here. They want to win the national championship. They have the team to win the national championship this year. So yes, my final score prediction for the Fiesta Bowl is Michigan 38, TCU 21. Y'all let me know in the comments section, do you agree with my assessment of the Fiesta Bowl? And if you don't, where do you disagree with me at? And what is your final score prediction for the Fiesta Bowl? That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.